anyway, we had the sleep study, and it turned out that all along he had a central sleep apnea. So this is actually like a sleep apnea that comes from the brain. So it's not due to like an obstruction, you would know, but it's not due to an obstruction. It's actually, the messaging from the brain, which isn't constantly communicating that you should be breathing. So that's why I was having these desaturations. And at that point, I think the score is something like 5 that they need. If they score over 5, they need oxygen. And he scored 4.8. So he was just under the threshold. And what happens with essential sleep apnea is it actually resolves over time. So what he sort of indicated at that point was that, it was likely he had this from birth, and the hospital had diagnosed this tracheomalacia and, thought that was the full picture. But in fact, he had this apnea this entire time. And, at one point it may have been likely that he probably did need oxygen overnight. But we were sort of released from hospital anyway. So after that, we were told there isn't really much we can do. We were also told from the respiratory sleep specialist, who was quite old school, that the only thing you can do in that point in time is to sleep train.
Are you kidding?
No. So
your kid who is waking because his brain's like forgetting to breathe needs to be sleep trained.
Because obviously at that point you're not teaching the child to sleep. That's obviously an impossibility because it's a physical thing. But you're teaching him to stop calling to you. That's right. So
that is horrific.
Yeah, and he must be about 60. So he's very old school. When he said that to me, I don't even think I really even responded at that point. I just thought, obviously that's not for us. I'm not going to make it this far. And then sleep train my poor child who has a health issue. And
after all that you've been through, and perhaps maybe he could also attribute the fact that you've been so responsive with the fact that this apnea hadn't actually caused further health concerns.
And that's right. I often think about that. If he was, that the reason that babies, when you sleep, I have read a lot of the work of Dr. James McKenna and about, the relationship between, mother and baby and what happens when we co-sleep. And, part of that is obviously, it's a safety mechanism that, you wake the baby in your movement, in your breathing, and, that's obviously protective against SIDS. So I often think about what would have happened if we had taken that path, or we had sleep trained, or we had left him in his bassinet. Would the situation have been different? I don't know. You never know. But, I'm always so thankful that we did go down this path of sleep training, and it was partly because of the Beyond Sleep Training group, but also partly just for pure survival at that point that we did, because, you just never know if he would have been probably a big candidate for SIDS. So, that was our little journey.